The papers arrived before the eulogy. By the time my name was read, the ink was dry and the room had gone still. My father's photograph stood on an easel near the front, the frame catching the overhead lights. I had adjusted it earlier because it leaned to the left. Now I stood beside it with my hands folded, listening to the low hum of people settling into their seats. Someone coughed. A program slipped from a lap and brushed the floor. My husband didn't sit with the rest of the family. He waited near the side aisle, close to the wall where the hymn numbers were posted. When he stepped toward me, he held a black folder, the way people hold condolence cards, flat, careful, almost respectful. He didn't say my name. He didn't look at the picture. He placed the folder on the small table that held the guest book. The pen was already uncapped. I noticed that before I noticed the title page. The paper was clipped cleanly at the corner. No creases, no tabs. Just my name typed where it always is. The funeral director paused a few feet away. He had been mid-step, one hand lifted as if to guide someone into the row. He stopped without lowering it. The minister glanced over, then down at his notes, then back up. No one spoke. My husband spoke toward the folder. He didn't lift his chin. It's just acknowledgement. He slid the papers an inch closer. I picked up the pen. It was heavier than the ones on the sign-in table usually are. The metal felt cool against my fingers. I didn't read the pages. I signed where the clip pointed. I dated it. The pen made a soft scratch. Someone in the back row shifted, then settled. The minister cleared his throat. He waited until the folder was closed. When my name was read, I stepped back into place. The eulogy began. The photograph stayed straight. Afterward, people lined up the way they always do. They said the same phrases, in the same order. Hands touched my arm. A woman pressed a tissue into my palm and nodded, as if we had an agreement not to talk. My husband stood apart, his phone face down in his hand. I watched the folder travel. He tucked it under his arm when someone approached him. He set it on a chair when he shook a hand. He kept it dry when a cup tipped near the refreshment table. The pen disappeared into his pocket. The funeral director approached me near the end, when the chairs were being folded. He asked if everything was all right. His eyes flicked to the folder and back to my face. I told him yes. He nodded once and made a small note on a pad he kept tucked into his jacket. He tore the page off and slid it into a pocket. At home that night, I placed my father's watch on the dresser. I took off my shoes and left them by the door. The house was quiet in the way it gets after a long day when nothing is left to move. My phone vibrated once. I didn't turn it over. The next morning, a call came while I was standing at the kitchen counter. The number was unfamiliar. I answered because the kettle was already whistling and my hands were busy. "This is the court clerk," the woman said. She spoke clearly, the way people do when they're reading from a screen. "I have a question about service details." I set the kettle down. Steam fogged the window above the sink. She asked where the papers had been served. I said the location. There was a pause. I could hear keys clicking. She asked what time. I told her it was before the service began. "All right," she said. "There may be a follow-up." After the call ended, the kettle clicked off by itself. I poured the water anyway. The mug warmed my hands. On the counter, my father's watch ticked, steady and small. That afternoon, another message came through, this one an email. It was short. It thanked me for confirming information and said the file would be reviewed. No signature, just a reference number. I forwarded it to the address my husband had used for filings in the past. The message showed as sent. It stayed that way. By evening, the house phone rang. It was my sister. She asked how I was holding up. I said I was fine. She hesitated, then said the funeral director had mentioned something about paperwork. He hadn't said more. He just said there would be notes. I didn't want to ask, she said. "You can," I said. She didn't. That night, I placed the mug in the sink and rinsed it. The watch kept ticking. My phone lit up once more with a calendar notification I hadn't set. A date had shifted. No explanation followed. The black folder didn't stay at the funeral home. It showed up again on my kitchen table 2 days later, set down like it belonged there. My husband placed it beside the salt shaker and walked away without closing the cupboard he'd opened. The hinge creaked once, then held. He didn't look at me. He looked at the surface of the table, as if the wood grain mattered. "I already filed," he said. I pulled the folder toward me with 2 fingers. The cardboard dragged softly over the laminate. Inside, the top page was the same one I'd signed. Under it was a thinner sheet with a block of typed lines and a space for someone else's name. The words were plain: date, time, location, method, a service affidavit. My eyes went to the blank for location first, then to the time. I ran a fingernail under the line like it could lift. It didn't. The ink was flat and final. My husband tapped the affidavit with the side of his thumb. "That's the proof," he said, "so it can move." He said it the way people talk about a repair appointment, like progress was neutral. I slid the page back into place and closed the folder. The clasp made a small click. He took that as permission to keep talking. "You didn't make a scene," he said. "Thank you for that, Ada." I put the folder in the drawer under the phone book, the one we never used. The drawer was too tight and always caught halfway. I pushed it closed until it latched. The action took longer than it should have. Later that afternoon, my sister texted a single question: "Was that divorce papers?" I set my phone face down on the counter. The screen went dark. I rinsed a plate that was already clean, just to keep my hands moving. When I turned the phone back over, there were 2 more messages in the thread. One from my aunt, one from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in months. "He did it there? Are you okay?" I didn't answer. Under my sister's name, the typing bubble appeared, stopped, then appeared again. A moment later, the tiny word "seen" popped under my last message to her from days ago. No new words followed it. The next morning, I drove back to the funeral home with the folder in my bag. The parking lot was mostly empty. A delivery van idled near the side door. I sat in my car for a minute with my hands on the wheel, listening to the turn signal click even though I wasn't turning. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. A bell sat on the front desk. I pressed it once. The sound was small but sharp. The funeral director came out from a hallway with a clipboard tucked under his arm. His tie was different from the day of the service, but his expression was the same careful kind. "I'm sorry," he said, before I'd said anything. He looked at my bag. He didn't ask what was inside. "I got a call," I told him. "From the court clerk." His eyes flicked down to the clipboard and back up. "Yes," he said. "They called here too." He moved the clipboard to the desk and turned it so I could see the top sheet. It wasn't my father's paperwork. It was a plain form with lines and boxes. At the bottom was a short paragraph in smaller print. Next to it, his handwriting sat in the margin, compact and even. He didn't dramatize it. He didn't say my husband's name. He said, "We keep notes when something interrupts the service." He slid the paper a few inches closer to me. His fingers stayed on the edge, as if he still owned it. The note was simple. "Before eulogy. Folder presented at guestbook table. Witnesses present." Minister paused. There was a time written beside it. It matched what I remembered without effort. "I don't want trouble," he said. "I'm not asking for trouble," I said. He nodded once, like that was the only answer he needed. On the drive home, I didn't play the radio. I kept hearing the scrape of chairs from that day, the sound people make when they don't know where to put their hands. When I got home, an envelope sat in my mailbox with a court return address. I brought it inside and set it on the table. I didn't open it right away. I washed my hands first, rubbing soap between my fingers until the scent covered everything else. Inside the envelope was a single sheet, a confirmation notice with a reference number. At the bottom, in smaller print, it said the court might contact witnesses to verify service details. It didn't accuse anyone. It didn't explain why. It just stated what could happen next. My husband walked in while I was holding the page. His eyes went to the return address, then to the line about verification. "They're not going to do all that," he said. He reached for the folder like it was his to manage. I folded the notice once and put it back in the envelope. I kept my hand on it. He stopped reaching. He smiled without showing teeth, then stepped away from the table. That evening, my phone buzzed again. The vibration skittered it an inch across the counter before it stopped. The screen lit up blue in the dim kitchen. Service review, additional information required. At the courthouse, the line moved in small inches. People held folders the way they held coffee, careful not to spill, careful not to drop. I brought the black folder anyway. I didn't need it for what I was there to do. I just didn't want it sitting in my drawer like a live thing. The security guard pointed at the plastic bin without looking up. I slid my keys, my phone, and the folder into it. The folder made a dull sound against the plastic. When it came out on the other side, the corner was scuffed. I rubbed my thumb over it once, then stopped. Inside, the air was warm and too still. A television in the corner played without sound. The captions ran across the bottom like they were trying to keep up. The intake window had a number above it. The glass was scratched at eye level from years of people leaning in. A strip of tape held up a printed sign. No food or drink. Forms must be complete. I stood behind a man in a work uniform. He kept checking his watch, then the window, then his watch again. When he stepped away, it was my turn. The clerk behind the glass had a headset on, one ear covered, one ear free. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She looked like someone whose job was to keep things moving, not to understand them. "Name?" she asked. I told her. She typed. Her nails were short. The keys clicked in quick bursts, then stopped. She looked at her screen, then at the folder in my hands. "Are you here to file something?" she asked. "I got a notice," I said, "about service verification." She held out her hand through the gap under the glass. Not for my hand, for paper. I slid the court notice through. The paper scraped against the counter on the other side. She read it without moving her lips. Then she tilted her head slightly, like she was reading a line twice. "Do you have the service affidavit?" she asked. I opened the folder. The clasp clicked the way it always did. I pulled out the affidavit and slid it through the gap. She read it longer. The line behind me stayed quiet. I could feel people listening anyway. It wasn't curiosity exactly. It was the way waiting rooms get when one person's issue becomes a pause in the room's rhythm. Her eyes went to the location line. She tapped the page once with the tip of a pen she held, not writing yet. "This says funeral chapel," she said. "Yes," I said. She didn't react. She just looked up again. "What funeral home?" she asked. I told her the name. She typed. Her screen reflected faintly in the glass. I couldn't see the words, but I could see the shape of her attention shifting faster, then slower, then stopping. "And the time?" she asked. "Before the service began," I said. "Before the eulogy." She paused. Not a dramatic pause, a procedural one, like a door that didn't open on the first try. Behind me, someone's shoe squeaked on the tile. Then it stopped, as if they'd realized they'd made noise. The clerk set the affidavit down and reached to her right, out of sight, then brought back a single sheet of paper. It was a form with a few boxes checked and space at the bottom for notes. "Were there witnesses?" she asked, still not looking at me. "Yes," I said. "A lot." She nodded once and wrote something in the notes section. The pen made a faint scratch. It was the same sound as the funeral pen, just lighter. "Do you have any witness statements?" she asked. I hadn't planned to. I'd told myself I wasn't going to collect people like receipts. But the funeral director's note had stayed in my head, and the night before, my sister had sent me a picture of a paper someone had slipped into her purse at the reception. She hadn't known what to do with it, so she'd kept it. I pulled my phone out and opened the message thread. My sister's photo filled the screen. A short statement on plain paper, a name at the bottom, a shaky signature that looked like it had been written standing up. It read, "I was ushering near the front." I saw him hand her papers at the guest book table before the eulogy. The minister paused. People looked. I didn't hand over my phone. I didn't want my screen behind glass. "I have a photo of one," I said. "From an usher." End quote. The clerk held out her hand again, and this time she slid a small slip of paper through the gap. "Email it to this address," she said. "Reference number in the subject line." The slip had a generic court email printed on it, and beneath it, the clerk had written the reference number in neat, narrow digits. I read the number twice, then typed it into my phone with my thumb. I attached the photo. The screen asked if I wanted to include my location. I turned that off. I sent it. The clerk watched her screen as if she could hear the email arrive. After a moment, she clicked her mouse once. Then again, "All right," she said. She pulled the affidavit closer and wrote one more line on the form. "What happens now?" I asked. She looked up, finally meeting my eyes through the scratched glass. "It gets reviewed," she said. "Sometimes we verify service details when the location is sensitive." She didn't say inappropriate. She didn't say wrong. She chose the word that belonged to policy. "Do you contact people?" I asked. "Possibly," she said. "We may contact witnesses. We may contact the venue. It depends." She stamped the affidavit with a date stamp and slid it back to me. The stamp left a faint purple mark in the corner. Not a verdict, just proof that it had touched the system. Then she did something small that changed the air anyway. She pulled a yellow sticky note from a stack and wrote on it. 3 quick strokes. She pressed it to the top of my file, then turned the folder on her side, away from the window, as if it was no longer just my business. "What did you write?" I asked, but my voice stayed low. I heard it against the glass like a whisper in a church. "Flag for review," she said, like she was reading it off the note. "Service location." Behind me, the line shifted. Nobody spoke. The man in the work uniform took 1 step back, then forward again, like he didn't know whether to give me space or take his turn. The clerk slid my notice back through the gap. She kept the copy of the affidavit. She kept her form. "Next," she called, and her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I stepped away from the window with the black folder held flat against my ribs. My phone buzzed once in my hand, a soft vibration, and I didn't look down yet. On the bench near the exit, I sat and opened the folder just enough to see the stamped corner of the paper she'd returned. The purple ink was still fresh. It smelled faintly like toner and rubber. My phone buzzed again. An email had come in from the court address on the slip. The subject line was "My reference number" copied cleanly. Under it was a single sentence. "Your file has been flagged for review. Additional verification may be required." I stared at the screen until it dimmed and went black. Then I turned it back on just to make sure the words were still there. The purple stamp dried into the corner of the page, and the rest of the paper stayed plain. No comments. No underlines. Just that one mark that said it had been handled. At home, I set the black folder on the counter and didn't open it right away. I took the court email slip from my pocket and placed it beside the fruit bowl, smoothing it flat with my palm. The reference number sat there like a small label you couldn't peel off. My husband came in while I was rinsing a glass. He watched the water run, then watched me shut it off. "You went down there," he said. I didn't ask how he knew. I dried my hands on a towel and folded it once, then twice, until the corners matched. "They flagged it," I said. He leaned one hip against the counter, keeping his distance from the folder as if it might stain him. "That doesn't mean anything," he said. "It's just processing." I lifted the folder and moved it to the table, away from the sink. The chair legs made a short scrape as I pulled one out. I didn't sit yet. "What did you put on the affidavit?" I asked. His face stayed smooth. "The truth," he said. I opened the folder and slid the affidavit out. The paper was warm from being in the sun on the table. I held it flat and read it line by line. Date. Time. Location. The location was written as Funeral Chapel. The funeral home name was correct. The time, though, sat oddly. It was earlier than I remembered, earlier than the minister had even walked in. I looked at the line again, then at the date stamp from the clerk, faint purple in the corner of my copy. "You wrote this time," I said. He shrugged, small. "It was around then." "It wasn't," I said, and my voice didn't rise. I set the paper down and tapped the time with my fingernail. Once. People were still coming in. And quote, "This is Ovation in what is Primus." He didn't answer right away. He glanced toward the hallway, as if checking whether anyone else was home. Then he said, "It doesn't matter. You signed. That's all they need." I pushed the affidavit back into the folder and closed it. The clasp clicked. The sound was louder than my words. That night, another email came from the same court address. It was shorter than the first. "Please provide any documentation from the venue regarding the service event." I read it twice, then forwarded it to the funeral director's general email, the one printed on their website and on the brochure they'd given me after the service. I used the reference number in the subject line the way the clerk had told me. I didn't add anything else. The message sat in my sent folder with a timestamp. The line under it stayed empty. In the morning, a reply came. The funeral director attached a PDF. No greeting, no apology this time. Just a line that said, "Attached is our incident memo for your reference." The memo was 1 page. It looked like a template they used for minor problems: spilled coffee, a guest argument, a late delivery. Someone had filled it out in neat blocks. Description of event: papers presented to immediate family member at guestbook table prior to eulogy. Staff response: service paused briefly. Witnesses: multiple. Notes: family member remained composed. No raised voices observed. I read that last line and felt my mouth go dry, not because it was flattering, because it was now a fact in someone else's file. I printed the memo and set it in the folder behind the affidavit. The paper made a clean, soft sound as it slid into place. When I closed the folder, the stack inside felt thicker, more real. 2 days later, a letter came by mail. Court letterhead, black ink, the same reference number in the upper right corner. I opened it at the table with the pen still capped beside my hand. The letter didn't accuse anyone. It didn't explain what was wrong. It listed items the court had received: the affidavit, a witness statement image, the venue memo. Then, it listed what it was requesting next: a filing receipt to confirm sequence and any amended information the serving party wished to submit. At the bottom, it gave a date and time for a brief status hearing if the matter wasn't resolved by document review. A Tuesday morning. I flipped the page over to check if there was more. There wasn't. When my husband came home, I left the letter on the table, unfolded. I didn't point at it. I didn't push it toward him. I just went back to wiping the counter the way I always did. Straight lines, no circles. He stopped when he saw the letterhead. His hand hovered over it, then dropped. "They're making it dramatic," he said. "It's paperwork," I said. He picked up the letter anyway. His eyes moved faster than mine had. He read the date twice. "They can't undo service," he said, more to himself than to me. "They don't do that." I watched his thumb rub the edge of the paper, back and forth, the way people do when they're trying to wear down an idea. The next day, another notice came through the online portal, an automated entry with the filing number. I logged in with the reference number and my last name. The screen was plain, mostly white, with black text and a blue link. Under case events, a new line had been added. Service details under review. Amended service record requested. There was a second line beneath it, smaller. Filing receipt required to confirm timeline. I clicked the event, and a small window popped up with the same words, as if repeating them made them firmer. That night, my husband set his phone face down on the couch arm and said, "I'll handle it." Okay, and some things for watching. He said it like a promise. I went to the drawer under the phone book and pulled the black folder out. The drawer caught halfway, like it always did. I tugged it once, then eased it free. Inside the folder, the papers lay flat and quiet. On the last page, the one with the service time, my husband's handwriting had pressed through faintly onto the sheet, beneath an indentation you could feel if you ran your fingertip over it. I did that once. Then I stopped, because the doorbell rang. Not a quick ring, a steady one, held a little too long. The doorbell stopped before I reached it. When I opened the door, the porch was empty. A small, padded envelope sat on the mat, angled like it had been placed carefully. No logo, no handwriting, just my name printed from a label maker and the return address of the courthouse. I picked it up and closed the door with my foot. The latch caught on the first try. Inside the envelope was a filing receipt. 1 page, black ink, a barcode at the top and a column of dates and times beneath it. The paper was thin enough that the print showed through from the back. I carried it to the table and laid it beside the letter from earlier that week. The reference numbers matched. I lined them up until the margins were even. My husband came in while I was doing that. He stopped short when he saw the envelope. "They mailed that?" he asked. I didn't answer. I flattened the receipt with my palm and traced the first timestamp with my finger. Filed. 9:42 a.m. Service listed. 9:15 a.m. The next line showed the intake time at the courthouse. Filed before service. I didn't say it out loud. The numbers did the work. My husband leaned closer. close enough that I could feel the air shift. "That's not how it works," he said. "They log things later." I slid the receipt across the table so the barcode faced him. The paper made a dry sound against the wood. "Look again," I said. He did. His mouth tightened, then loosened, like he was trying on different responses. None of them stayed. "That's a clerical thing," he said finally. "They'll fix it." I folded the receipt once and set it back beside the envelope. I didn't tear it. I didn't hide it. That afternoon, an alert appeared in the court portal. No email this time, just a red dot next to the case number. I logged in and read the update. Amended service record required. Filing sequence discrepancy noted. Below it, in smaller text, serving party to submit clarification within 72 hours. The system had moved without asking either of us. My husband paced the length of the living room. He stopped at the window, then at the couch, then back at the table. Each time, his phone stayed in his hand, screen dark. "I'll call my attorney," he said. I nodded. I picked up the black folder and opened it. I slid the affidavit out and placed it next to the receipt, aligning the times so they could be seen at once. The indentation from his handwriting still showed through faintly on the page beneath. I didn't touch it this time. The phone rang on the counter. He answered on the second ring and turned his back to me. "Yes," he said. "Yes, I know." He lowered his voice. I could hear it anyway, the words falling into the shape of defense. "It was a sensitive day," he said, "but it was proper service." There was a pause. He listened. His shoulders dropped a fraction. "No," he said, "no one told me that." He ended the call and set the phone down face down, harder than before. "They want me to amend it," he said, "just to clarify." "To clarify what?" I asked. "The timing," he said. "The location language." I closed the folder and held it against my ribs the way I had at the courthouse. "You already clarified," I said. "In writing." He didn't answer. That evening, another notification appeared. An automated calendar entry added itself to the case. Status Hearing Service Review. The date matched the one from the letter. The time was early enough that traffic would be light. I printed the calendar page and pinned it to the corkboard by the fridge, covering an old grocery list. The pushpin went in straight. My sister called later. She didn't ask questions this time. She told me she'd been contacted by the court clerk's office. They wanted to confirm what she'd seen at the funeral. They said it was routine, she said. They sounded careful. "That's good," I said. When I hung up, my husband was standing in the doorway, listening. He hadn't meant to be obvious, but he hadn't moved away either. "They're dragging everyone into this," he said. "They already were," I said. He looked at the corkboard, then at the folder in my hands. "You don't have to bring that," he said. "They have copies." "I know," I said. I put the folder back in the drawer under the phone book. The drawer stuck halfway. I pressed it closed until it caught. That night, the house settled the way it always did. Lights off one by one. Refrigerator hummed. Then phone buzzed once a portal alert. No details, just hearing clerk will contact witnesses. On the kitchen table, the envelope stayed open. Barcode faced up. I didn't move it. The courtroom was quieter than the funeral chapel had been. Different chairs, different air. The same feeling that a room could decide something without raising its voice. I got there early because the calendar entry told me to. The hallway lights buzzed faintly. A vending machine glowed blue at the far end, full of snacks no one touched. I sat on a bench with the black folder flat on my lap, my hands resting on it like it might slide away. My husband arrived 5 minutes before the clerk opened the door. He didn't come to the bench. He stood near the water fountain and stared at the wall sign that said, "No cell phones on," like it had new information. When the door opened, people filed in with the same slow order. Lawyers first, then couples, then one person alone. The bailiff didn't need to say much. He just pointed. We sat when he pointed. We stood when he pointed. The judge came in without ceremony. He looked at the screen in front of him and didn't look up right away. The clerk sat to the side with a stack of files and a date stamp. She had a pen in her hand. It was capped. She rolled it between her fingers once, then set it down. "Case number," she said, reading from the top file. She said the reference number the way a cashier says a total. My husband's attorney stood. My husband stood with him. I stood because everyone else did. My chair legs made a soft scrape, then stopped. "This is a status hearing regarding service review," the clerk said. She didn't add tone. She didn't add judgment. She looked down at the file again. My husband's attorney began with a sentence about proper service, but he kept it short, like he'd been told not to decorate it. The judge raised one hand slightly, not stopping him, just narrowing the lane. "Clerk," the judge said, still looking at his screen, "read the intake note." The clerk lifted one sheet from the file. It was plain paper, but it had the weight of being in the right place at the right time. She read it out loud. "Service location listed as funeral chapel," she said. "Service time conflicts with filing timestamp. Venue documentation received. Witness statement received. Flagged for review." She stopped there. Not because she was finished, but because the room had stopped moving. Even the people in the back, people who weren't part of us, held still the way they do when a word lands, and no one wants to be the first to cover it. My husband's attorney cleared his throat. It was a small sound and didn't do anything. The judge finally looked up. His eyes went to my husband, then to me, then down again. "Counsel," he said to my husband's attorney, "your filing receipt is stamped at 9:42 a.m. You are claiming service at 9:15. "It was served earlier," the attorney said. "The filing time." "The filing time is the filing time," the judge said. He wasn't sharp, he was flat, and the location is noted as sensitive. My husband shifted his weight. His shoes made a quiet rub on the floor. He stopped when he realized it. The judge turned one page on his screen with a click. "You've been asked to amend the service record," he said. "Have you done so?" My husband's attorney opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked down at the table, then at my husband's face, as if checking whether he had something hidden to hand over. "We can submit an amended affidavit," he said, "if the court requires it." The judge nodded once, like the requirement had already happened. "It does," he said, "and given the discrepancy, I am ordering an amended service record with accurate time and method, and a corrected service date if necessary." He didn't look at me when he said it. He didn't need to. The order didn't belong to either of us. It belonged to the file. My husband's attorney tried again, softer. "Your Honor, service was acknowledged by signature." The clerk's pen rolled once, stopped by her finger. She didn't write yet. The judge held the silence for a beat, then said, "A signature acknowledges receipt. It does not repair a false timeline." No one reacted. No gasp. No whisper. Just the sound of paper shifting in someone's hands, and then stopping, as if they'd remembered where they were. The clerk looked down, and this time she read from another line. "Costs associated with amended service filing are assessed to the serving party," she said. My husband's attorney nodded like he'd expected it. My husband didn't nod. The judge added, "The timeline is reset for purposes of procedure. The court will not proceed on the current service record." He said it plainly. It was the kind of sentence that doesn't sound like a win. It sounds like a door being put back on its hinges. "Next steps," the clerk said, already moving, already putting the room back into its usual shape. "Amended record due within 72 hours. A new status date will issue if required." The judge looked down again. "Anything else?" he asked, and his voice made it clear he didn't want stories. My husband's attorney said no. I said nothing. The bailiff opened the door. In the hallway, people walked around us like water around a rock. A couple argued in whispers near the elevator. A man in a suit tapped his foot and stared at a wall clock. My husband stood beside me for the first time in days. He didn't touch me. He didn't speak. He stared at the white strip of paper the clerk had handed his attorney, a scheduling slip with neat printed lines and blanks. His attorney leaned toward him and murmured something I couldn't hear. My husband's jaw moved once, like he was chewing a word. Then he swallowed it. I walked to the clerk's window at the end of the hall to collect a stamped copy of the order. The clerk from intake wasn't there, but the motion was the same. Glass, gap, paper sliding. When the stamped copy came out, it was warm from the printer. The stamp was purple again. My hands smelled faintly of ink. Outside, the sky was bright and ordinary. Cars moved. People carried coffee. Nobody knew what a quiet order had just done. At home, I opened the drawer under the phone book and pulled out the black folder. The drawer caught halfway. I eased it open, slower than usual, until it released. I placed the stamped copy inside, on top. I capped the pen I'd found in my bag, a cheap one from the courthouse lobby, and set it in the folder's spine where it wouldn't roll. Then I closed the folder. The clasp clicked once. I set it back in the drawer and pushed until the latch caught. Life didn't feel resolved. It just felt rearranged.